Hey there. Tonight, we're stepping into a world that existed long before humans ever drew breath. A time when our planet was ruled by creatures so massive, so deadly, that they'd make today's apex predators look like house cats. We're traveling back 5.8 million years ago to the late Miocene epoch, when your neighbors weren't concerned about property lines or noise complaints. They were concerned about whether you'd make it through the night without becoming dinner. If you're enjoying these deep dives into prehistoric worlds, I'd really appreciate a quick like or subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. I'm always curious about where you all are watching from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see our little community of time travelers spread across the globe. Now, settle in, maybe dim the lights, and let's journey back to an era when survival wasn't guaranteed and every day was a life or death struggle against neighbors who measured their strength in tons, not pounds. Picture this: you've just opened your eyes in the late Miocene, 5.8 million years ago. Congratulations, you're alive. But honestly, that might not last very long. The world around you is nothing like the sanitized nature documentaries you've seen. This isn't the peaceful, balanced ecosystem that modern conservation efforts try to preserve. This is nature red in tooth and claw, where the food chain is a brutal hierarchy, and you're definitely not at the top. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you hear. The sounds of this ancient world would stop your heart cold. In the distance, a low rumbling growl that seems to shake the ground beneath your feet. It's not thunder, it's something far more dangerous. Something with teeth the size of railroad spikes and jaws powerful enough to crush a small car. You're standing in what will one day become part of modern-day Kenya. But the landscape is almost unrecognizable. Dense woodlands stretch as far as the eye can see, broken by vast savannas that shimmer in the heat. Rivers wind through the terrain, their banks lined with vegetation so thick it could hide creatures the size of city buses. And trust me, it does. The air is thick and humid, filled with scents that your modern nose has never encountered. The sweet smell of unknown flowers mixes with something far less pleasant, the unmistakable odor of decay. Death is everywhere here, not because this world is particularly cruel, but because this is simply how nature operates when there are no safety nets, no hospitals, no rescue services. When you fall hard, and something is always waiting to take advantage. But what makes this world truly terrifying isn't just that it's dangerous, it's that everything is scaled up to nightmarish proportions. The herbivores that should be harmless are massive, unpredictable giants. The carnivores are living nightmares that make today's lions and tigers look like kittens. And the omnivores, well, they're the most dangerous of all because they're smart enough to see you as both competition and food. Let's start with your immediate surroundings. You're not alone in this prehistoric wilderness. Moving through the undergrowth nearby is a creature that would make you question everything you thought you knew about early human evolution. It's called Gigantopithecus, though the name hardly does justice to the reality of encountering one. Standing nearly 10 feet tall when fully upright, this isn't some gentle giant from a fairy tale. This is 600 pounds of muscle, bone, and primal intelligence wrapped in coarse, dark hair. Its arms are longer than your entire body, and its hands, when clenched into fists, are larger than your head. But it's the face that would haunt your dreams. Massive, protruding jaw filled with teeth designed for crushing. Eyes that hold an intelligence that's almost human, but not quite. Something that recognizes you as different, potentially threatening, definitely edible. Gigantopithecus isn't technically a predator in the traditional sense. It's primarily a plant eater, using those massive teeth to strip bark from trees and crush tough vegetation that would be impossible for smaller creatures to digest. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you. When you're that large, when you're that powerful, the line between herbivore and omnivore becomes dangerously thin. A creature that can casually snap tree trunks in half isn't going to hesitate if it decides you're a threat to its territory or its young, and they do have young. Somewhere in the dense forest around you, juvenile Gigantopithecus are learning to navigate this dangerous world under the watchful eyes of their parents. Parents who would kill anything they perceived as a threat without a moment's hesitation. These aren't the wise, gentle giants of modern guerrilla documentaries. These are creatures living in a world where showing weakness means death, where every meal might be your last, where trust is a luxury that evolution hasn't yet invented. The sound you heard earlier, that bone-deep rumbling, it's getting closer. Through the trees, you catch glimpses of movement. Something massive pushing through vegetation like it's tissue paper. The ground actually trembles with each step, and you realize with growing horror that whatever is approaching doesn't need to be stealthy. When you're that large, that powerful, stealth is optional. But Gigantopithecus isn't the only neighbor you need to worry about. Oh no, that would be far too simple. This world is populated by an entire cast of creatures that evolution seemed to design specifically to give you nightmares. In the rivers that snake through this prehistoric landscape lurks Purosaurus, a crocodilian so massive it makes today's saltwater crocodiles look like lizards. At over 40 feet long and weighing as much as a small truck, this isn't just a predator, it's a living submarine designed for death. Its jaws, when fully opened, could swallow a modern car whole. Its bite force measured in the tens of thousands of pounds per square inch, enough to crush whale bones like breadsticks. Purosaurus doesn't hunt like modern crocodiles, lying in wait for some unfortunate animal to come for a drink. No, this monster is an active predator, capable of launching its massive bulk out of the water to snatch prey from the riverbank. Imagine walking to what you think is a peaceful stream for a drink of water, only to have something the size of a school bus explode from the depths, with jaws that could cut you in half before you even realized what was happening. But here's what makes it even more terrifying. Purosaurus isn't just found in rivers. Fossil evidence suggests these giants were perfectly capable of moving between water sources, traveling overland when necessary, which means nowhere is truly safe. That peaceful-looking watering hole half a mile from the nearest river, still potentially deadly. That marshy area that looks too shallow for anything dangerous. Think again. The intelligence of these ancient predators is what separates them from the mindless monsters of Hollywood films. Purosaurus had to be smart to survive in a world filled with other apex predators. It had to learn migration patterns, seasonal changes, the behavior of prey species. It had to adapt and evolve or die. And the fact that these creatures thrived for millions of years tells you everything you need to know about their intelligence, their adaptability, and their absolute lethality. As if giant crocodilians weren't enough, the skies above you are patrolled by creatures that would make Alfred Hitchcock's Birds look like a gentle nature documentary. Argentavis magnificens, the largest flying bird that ever lived, soars overhead on wings that span nearly 25 feet. This isn't some majestic eagle soaring peacefully through mountain thermals. This is a flying death machine with a wingspan wider than most modern aircraft and talons that could pierce through bone like needles through cloth. Standing as tall as a human when grounded, Argentavis weighed as much as a large man, but possessed the ability to launch itself into the air and attack from angles that ground-based predators could never achieve. Its beak, nearly 2 feet long, was perfectly designed for tearing flesh from bone. Its eyes, positioned for maximum predatory efficiency, could spot movement from miles away. But perhaps most terrifying of all, Argentavis was intelligent enough to use tools. Not in the way we think of tool use today, but in the way that only the most sophisticated predators can. It would drop prey from great heights to break bones and tenderize meat. It would use wind currents and thermals, not just for efficient flight, but for silent approaches that gave prey no warning of impending death. The hunting strategies of Argentavis were sophisticated beyond what most people imagine possible for a prehistoric creature. It would circle high above herds of animals, not just looking for the weak or the isolated, but actually studying behavior patterns, learning which routes animals took to water, which areas they avoided, which times of day they were most vulnerable, and when it struck with the precision of a guided missile. Diving from heights of several thousand feet, reaching speeds that would make modern fighter jets envious, Argentavis could deliver a killing blow before its prey even knew they were being hunted. The impact alone, several hundred pounds traveling at terminal velocity, was often enough to kill instantly. But the truly nightmare-inducing aspect of sharing a world with Argentavis wasn't just its hunting ability, it was its appetite. A creature that large, that active, needed enormous amounts of food to survive, which meant it couldn't afford to be picky about its prey. Anything that moved, anything that might provide calories, was potentially on the menu. This includes you. Walking through this prehistoric world, you'd constantly need to be aware of the sky above you. That shadow passing overhead might not be a cloud. That sound of rushing wind might not be a weather front moving in. In a world where death could literally drop from the sky without warning, paranoia wasn't a mental illness. It was a survival strategy. But the aerial threats are just the beginning of your nightmare. On the ground, moving through the dense undergrowth with the silent efficiency of a shadow, stalks one of the most perfectly designed killing machines evolution has ever produced. Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, though calling it simply a cat, is like calling a nuclear bomb a firecracker. At 600 pounds of pure muscle and predatory instinct, Smilodon wasn't just larger than modern big cats. It was built entirely differently. Those famous saber teeth, each one nearly 8 inches long, weren't just for show. They were precision instruments, evolved over millions of years to deliver death with surgical accuracy. But here's what most people don't understand about those massive canines. They weren't used like modern cat teeth for gripping and suffocating prey. No, Smilodon was an assassin. Those saber teeth were designed to slice through the thick hide and massive neck muscles of prehistoric megafauna with a single perfectly placed bite. The cat would use its enormously powerful forequarters, muscles that would make a bodybuilder weep with envy, to wrestle its prey to the ground. Then, with the precision of a surgeon and the cold efficiency of an executioner, it would drive those sabers deep into the neck, severing major arteries and causing its victim to bleed out in seconds. But what makes Smilodon truly terrifying isn't just its killing ability, it's how it lived. These weren't solitary hunters like modern tigers. Fossil evidence suggests they lived and hunted in social groups, possibly family units that worked together with the coordination of a military strike team. Imagine not one, but 3 or 4 of these monsters surrounding you, each one knowing exactly what the others were going to do, each one perfectly positioned to cut off any escape route. Their hunting strategies were sophisticated beyond anything we see in today's predators. They would study their prey for days, learning patterns, identifying weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they did attack, it was with the coordinated precision of apex predators who had refined their techniques over millions of years of evolution, and they were patient, terrifyingly patient. A Smilodon could follow potential prey for miles, staying just out of sight, waiting for the right moment when their target was vulnerable, isolated, or simply too tired to fight back effectively. They understood that energy conservation was crucial in a world where every calorie mattered, where a failed hunt could mean starvation, where showing weakness could attract the attention of something even more dangerous. The intelligence required for this kind of hunting is staggering. These cats had to understand not just their own capabilities, but the capabilities of their prey. They had to predict behavior, anticipate reactions, and plan several moves ahead, like chess masters playing a game where losing meant death. But even Smilodon, apex predator though it was, lived in constant awareness of other threats. Because in this world, being at the top of the food chain was a temporary position, subject to change without notice. Lurking in the deeper forests, moving through the trees with an agility that defied its massive size, was Megatherium, the giant ground sloth. Now, before you dismiss this as just another plant eater, let me paint you a clearer picture. This creature stood 12 feet tall on its hind legs and weighed as much as a modern elephant. Its claws, each one longer than a human forearm, were capable of stripping bark from the largest trees or disemboweling any creature foolish enough to get too close. The name sloth is misleading in the most dangerous way possible. Yes, Megatherium was primarily herbivorous, but it was also opportunistically omnivorous. And when you're that size, that powerful opportunity presents itself often. Those massive claws that could peel bark could just as easily peel flesh from bone. That powerful jaw designed for grinding tough vegetation could crush bones like twigs. What made Megatherium particularly dangerous was its unpredictability. Plant eaters in the modern world are generally predictable. They eat, they sleep, they try to avoid predators. But Megatherium was too large for most predators to threaten. It didn't need to run, it didn't need to hide. It could afford to be curious, aggressive, territorial in ways that smaller herbivores never could. And curiosity in a creature that weighs several tons is a deadly trait for anything smaller and more fragile. Like you, Megatherium would investigate anything unusual in its territory. Not with the cautious approach of a deer or the quick flight response of a rabbit, but with the confident, potentially lethal interest of something that had no natural enemies. If it decided you were a threat, it would eliminate that threat with the casual efficiency of someone swatting a fly. If it decided you might be food, well, you'd discover that those grinding teeth were perfectly capable of processing meat as well as plants. The social structure of these giants adds another layer of danger. They lived in family groups, possibly extended family units that claimed and defended territories spanning dozens of square miles. Stumble into the wrong area, and you might find yourself facing not one annoyed giant, but an entire clan of them, each one perfectly willing to defend their turf with lethal force. But perhaps most unnerving of all, Megatherium was intelligent. Not just instinctively smart like modern animals, but problem-solving, tool-using, situation-adapting, intelligent. They could modify their environment, create tools from branches and stones, and pass knowledge between generations. They were essentially giant, clawed, potentially carnivorous engineers, with the strength to demolish buildings and the intelligence to plan how to do it most effectively. Living in their shadow, both literally and figuratively, would mean constant vigilance. Every sound in the forest could be one of these giants moving through the trees. Every broken branch could signal their approach. Every moment of inattention could be your last. And we haven't even discussed the smaller predators yet. The ones that couldn't kill you with a single blow, but could kill you with 1,000 cuts. With persistence, with pack coordination, with the kind of relentless pressure that would drive you insane long before it killed you. Terrorbirds, flightless avian predators standing 8 feet tall, stalked the open grasslands with the speed of racehorses and the killing instinct of velociraptors. Their beaks, massive and sharp as spears, could punch through the skull of prey with the force of a sledgehammer. Their legs, powerful enough to outrun most mammals, could deliver kicks that would shatter bones like glass. But what made terrorbirds truly nightmarish wasn't their size or speed or killing ability. It was their persistence. These weren't ambush predators that gave up if their initial attack failed. They were pursuit predators, capable of running down prey across miles of terrain, wearing them down through sheer endurance and relentless pressure. Once a terrorbird marked you as prey, your options became very limited very quickly. You couldn't outrun it. You couldn't hide from it. You couldn't fight it effectively. Your only hope would be to reach terrain it couldn't navigate, or to find something even more dangerous that might distract it from hunting you. And they hunted in pairs. Two terror birds working together could coordinate their attacks with the precision of military tacticians. One would drive prey toward the other. One would attack from the front while the other attacked from behind. One would tire the prey while the other conserved energy for the killing blow. They communicated through calls and body language, adjusting their strategies in real time based on the behavior of their quarry. The psychological warfare these creatures waged was as devastating as their physical attacks. The sound of their calls, echoing across the grasslands, was enough to send every other animal within miles into panic. They understood that fear was a weapon, that terrified prey made mistakes, that psychological pressure could be just as effective as physical force. Living in a world with terror birds meant living with the constant knowledge that open ground was a death trap. Anytime you left the relative safety of dense forest, you were potentially exposing yourself to creatures that could spot movement from miles away and close that distance faster than you could possibly escape. The grasslands that looked so peaceful, so inviting, were actually killing fields patrolled by 8-foot-tall death machines, with the intelligence to plan your demise and the physical capabilities to execute those plans with surgical precision. Even sleep would become a luxury you couldn't afford. Terror birds were capable of hunting at night, using their acute hearing and sense of smell to track prey through complete darkness. The sounds of the night, which might seem peaceful to modern ears, would become a symphony of potential death. Every rustle of grass, every distant call, every change in the wind could signal the approach of something that had marked you for elimination. And if terror birds weren't enough to keep you awake at night, there were the pack hunters, creatures that had learned the most terrifying lesson evolution could teach, that cooperation multiplied killing power exponentially. Borophagus, the bone-crushing dog, traveled in coordinated hunting parties that could take down prey many times their individual size. Picture wolves, but scaled up to the size of modern bears, with jaws powerful enough to crack open the thigh bones of elephants. Their teeth weren't just sharp, they were engineered for maximum destruction. Premolars designed like bolt cutters, capable of shearing through hide, muscle, and bone with equal ease. Molars built like industrial crushers, turning bones into powder to extract every precious calorie from their kills. But the truly horrifying aspect of Borophagus wasn't their individual killing power, it was their intelligence. These weren't mindless killing machines driven purely by instinct. They were strategic thinkers, capable of complex problem solving and long-term planning. They could track prey for days, studying movement patterns, identifying the weakest members of herds, waiting for the perfect moment when their targets were most vulnerable. Their pack coordination was sophisticated beyond anything we see in modern predators. Different members of the pack had specialized roles. Scouts would locate and track potential prey. Drivers would position themselves to force animals toward waiting ambush points. Killers would deliver the fatal attacks, while others cut off escape routes. The entire operation would unfold with the precision of a military assault, each member knowing exactly what was expected of them and when. The psychological impact of being hunted by a Borophagus pack would be devastating. These creatures understood that fear was a weapon, that exhausted prey made fatal mistakes, that the anticipation of death could be as crippling as physical wounds. They would announce their presence deliberately, letting their prey know they were being stalked, using the stress and terror to weaken their victims before the actual attack began. Once a pack marked you for elimination, escape became nearly impossible. They could maintain pursuit for dozens of miles, taking turns so that fresh hunters were always pressuring exhausted prey. They could split up and reunite, approaching from multiple directions, simultaneously. They could adapt their tactics in real time, adjusting their strategy based on how their quarry responded to different types of pressure. And they were patient in ways that would break your mind. A Borophagus pack might follow potential prey for weeks, wearing them down through constant stress, preventing them from feeding properly, disrupting their sleep, driving them to the edge of nervous collapse before finally moving in for the kill. The nights would be the worst. Lying in whatever inadequate shelter you could find, you'd hear them calling to each other in the darkness. Not the howling of modern wolves, but something deeper, more intelligent, more deliberately menacing. They were communicating, sharing information about your location, your condition, your likely escape routes. They were planning your death while you tried desperately to sleep. But even the terrestrial nightmares pale in comparison to what lurked in the waters. The rivers and lakes of this prehistoric world weren't just dangerous because of Purosaurus. They were ecosystems of death, populated by creatures that had turned aquatic hunting into an art form. Leviathan melville, the sperm whale with teeth like railroad spikes, patrolled the deeper waters with an intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. At 60 feet long and weighing as much as a dozen elephants, this wasn't just a predator. It was a thinking, planning, strategizing death machine with the largest teeth of any animal that had ever lived. Each tooth was over a foot long, designed not just to grip prey, but to slice through it like organic chainsaws. The bite force was measured in tens of thousands of pounds per square inch, enough to crush the ribs of other whales, to shear through bone and blubber and muscle with horrifying ease. But what made Leviathan truly terrifying wasn't its size, or its teeth, or even its crushing bite force. It was its brain. Leviathan possessed one of the largest brains relative to body size of any predator that had ever lived. It could plan attacks weeks in advance, studying the migration patterns of prey species, learning their behaviors, anticipating their reactions. It could communicate with others of its kind across vast distances, coordinating hunting strategies that spanned entire ocean basins. The intelligence required for this level of predatory sophistication is staggering to contemplate. These creatures had to understand oceanography, weather patterns, the complex social structures of their prey. They had to be able to predict not just where their quarry would be, but where they would go when attacked, how they would react to different types of pressure, what their weaknesses were, and how to exploit them most effectively. And they were social hunters. Pods of Leviathan would work together like underwater wolf packs, each member playing a specific role in complex hunting strategies that could take hours to unfold. Some would drive prey toward waiting ambushes. Others would attack from below while their packmates struck from above. They could create walls of sound that would disorient and panic their victims, using echolocation not just to navigate, but as a weapon. The psychological warfare these ocean predators waged was as sophisticated as anything developed by modern military strategists. They understood that fear was contagious, that panic could spread through entire pods of prey animals like wildfire. They would deliberately create chaos and confusion, using the resulting mayhem to pick off isolated individuals who had become separated from their protective groups. Even approaching water would become an act of supreme courage or desperate necessity. Every ripple on the surface could signal the presence of something massive moving beneath. Every splash could be the sound of death preparing to launch itself from the depths. The very act of drinking water would require constant vigilance, knowing that something the size of a building could be stalking just below the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But perhaps most unnerving of all, the apex predators of this ancient world didn't just hunt for food. They hunted for territory, for dominance, for the simple pleasure of killing. Modern predators are generally efficient, taking only what they need to survive. But in a world where resources were abundant and competition was fierce, these ancient killers could afford to be wasteful, to kill for sport, to eliminate potential competitors simply because they could. Megalania, the giant monitor lizard, embodied this casual approach to dealing death. At 25 feet long and weighing as much as a small car, This wasn't just a large lizard. It was a cold-blooded killing machine with a metabolism that allowed it to be patient in ways that warm-blooded predators never could. Unlike mammals that needed to feed regularly to maintain their body temperature, Megalania could wait. It could go months between meals, spending that time studying potential prey, learning their habits, identifying their weaknesses. When it finally decided to hunt, it did so with the accumulated knowledge of weeks or months of observation. Its bite wasn't just mechanically devastating, it was chemically toxic. Megalania possessed venom glands that produced a cocktail of proteins designed to prevent blood clotting, cause tissue death, and induce shock. A single bite would deliver enough toxin to kill creatures many times its own size. Then it would simply follow its poisoned prey until the venom did its work. But what made Megalania particularly nightmarish was its intelligence and its complete lack of fear. This creature had no natural predators as an adult. It didn't need to run from anything, didn't need to hide from anything, didn't need to share territory with anything it didn't want to share with. It was the undisputed master of whatever environment it chose to inhabit. This supreme confidence translated into a hunting style that was both patient and utterly ruthless. Megalania would claim territory and then systematically eliminate everything within that territory that it considered competition or potential food, not through frenzied attacks or desperate hunger, but through methodical, calculated elimination of anything that didn't serve its purposes. The lizard could climb trees with surprising agility for its size, swim across rivers and lakes, and move through dense undergrowth with the silent efficiency of a shadow. There was literally nowhere you could go within its territory that would be safe from its attention. It would learn your routines, your hiding places, your sources of food and water, and then use that knowledge to plan your destruction with the cold precision of a reptilian assassin. And it would take its time. Megalania might spend weeks positioning itself, learning your patterns, waiting for the perfect moment when you were most vulnerable. The psychological pressure of knowing you were being stalked by something that could afford to wait months for the ideal opportunity would be enough to drive most creatures insane long before the actual attack came. Living in this prehistoric world would mean existing in a constant state of hypervigilance that would exhaust your nervous system and break your mind. Every moment of every day would require split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. Every sound would need to be analyzed, every shadow investigated, every change in the environment treated as a potential threat. The stress alone would be enough to kill you. Your body, designed for the relatively safe modern world, would be flooded with stress hormones 24 hours a day. Your immune system would collapse under the constant pressure. Your ability to think clearly would be compromised by chronic sleep deprivation and adrenaline fatigue. You would literally be scared to death, your own fear response becoming as dangerous as any predator stalking through the prehistoric darkness. And through it all, you would have the terrible knowledge that you weren't just facing individual threats, but an entire ecosystem designed around the principle that might makes right, that the strong survive and the weak become food, that mercy is a luxury that evolution has not yet invented. This was a world where showing weakness meant death, where making a single mistake meant elimination, where every day survived was a victory against overwhelming odds. Your neighbors weren't just dangerous, they were death incarnate, wrapped in scales and fur and feathers, armed with teeth and claws and toxins that could end your existence in ways too horrible to imagine. The morning sun rising over this prehistoric landscape wouldn't bring hope or warmth or the promise of a new day. It would bring only the terrible certainty that somewhere out there, something was already planning your destruction, studying your movements, calculating the perfect moment to turn you from a living creature into a meal. And the most terrifying part of all? This wasn't some nightmare realm created by a twisted imagination. This was Earth. This was home. This was the world that evolution built, where your ancestors somehow managed to survive long enough to pass their genes down through millions of years of unimaginable danger. they lived through this. They endured neighbors that could crush them without effort, that could hunt them across continents, that could plan their deaths with intelligence that matched their own. They survived in a world where being human meant being prey, where intelligence was just another tool in the endless struggle against creatures that were bigger, stronger, faster, and often just as smart. Your ancestors didn't just survive this prehistoric nightmare, they thrived in it. And that fact should terrify you more than any individual predator we've discussed so far, because it means that somewhere deep in your DNA, buried beneath millions of years of civilization and safety, lies the genetic memory of what it takes to live alongside monsters. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're still here, 5.8 million years ago, surrounded by creatures that view you as either a threat to be eliminated or calories to be consumed. And we haven't even talked about the truly insidious dangers yet, the ones that don't announce their presence with roars or massive footsteps, the ones that kill silently, efficiently, without giving you the courtesy of a fair fight. Moving through the dense undergrowth with the fluid grace of liquid death is Thylacosmilus, the marsupial saber-tooth. Now, before you think you understand what you're dealing with based on its name, let me correct that assumption immediately. This isn't some prehistoric cousin of Smilodon. This is something far worse. This is convergent evolution's most terrifying joke, proof that nature is so fond of the saber-toothed killing machine design that it invented it twice, completely independently. Thylacosmilus doesn't just have saber teeth, it has saber teeth that never stopped growing. Those 8-inch fangs were constantly being sharpened through use, constantly being replaced by new growth, constantly being perfected into more efficient killing tools. Unlike Smilodon, which had to be careful not to break its precious sabers, Thylacosmilus could use its teeth with reckless abandon, knowing that any damage would simply make them sharper. But here's where it gets truly nightmarish. Thylacosmilus was a marsupial, which means it carried its young in a pouch. Imagine a creature with the killing power of a saber-toothed cat, but with the protective instincts of a mother carrying the babies. The combination of apex predator lethality with maternal fury created something that defied every survival strategy evolution had developed. Most predators, even the most dangerous ones, could be avoided if you understood their behavior patterns. They hunted when hungry, rested when full, avoided unnecessary conflicts that might result in injury, but a Thylacosmilus with young operated under entirely different rules. It didn't hunt just for food. It eliminated anything it perceived as a potential threat to its offspring. And with saber teeth that could punch through the skull of a rhinoceros, its definition of threat was remarkably broad. The hunting style of Thylacosmilus was unlike anything else in the prehistoric world. Where Smilodon was a careful assassin, delivering precise killing bites and then waiting for prey to bleed out, Thylacosmilus was a berserker. It would attack with absolutely no regard for its own safety, using those ever-growing sabers like organic chainsaws, slicing and tearing and destroying everything within reach until nothing remained alive. But perhaps most disturbing of all, Thylacosmilus was curious. Dangerously, lethally curious. Those marsupial intelligence genes that would one day produce problem-solving kangaroos and tool-using opossums were already hard at work 5.8 million years ago. This creature would investigate anything unusual in its territory, not with the cautious wariness of most predators, but with the bold confidence of something that had never encountered anything it couldn't kill. That curiosity extended to problem-solving abilities that would make modern predators look like automatons. Thylacosmilus could figure out how to get around obstacles, how to exploit weaknesses in prey behavior, how to set traps using the environment itself as a weapon. It could learn from failed attacks and adjust its tactics accordingly. It could even use tools, manipulating branches and rocks to flush prey from hiding spots, or to create advantages in terrain. And it remembered. Oh, how it remembered. Thylacosmolus had the kind of memory that allowed it to hold grudges across seasons, to remember individual prey animals and their escape routes, to learn the patterns of entire ecosystems and exploit them with surgical precision. If you somehow managed to escape from one of these creatures, you hadn't won a victory. You had simply enrolled in a very deadly correspondence course in advanced predator behavior. The social structure of these marsupial nightmares added yet another layer of complexity to an already impossible survival situation. Unlike most saber-toothed predators, which were largely solitary, Thylacosmolus lived in loose family groups that maintained contact across vast territories. They would communicate through scent markings, vocal calls, and behavioral signals that could coordinate hunting efforts across dozens of square miles. A family group of Thylacosmolus could essentially lay siege to an entire region, systematically eliminating every potential prey animal within their claimed territory. They would work in shifts, with some members hunting while others rested, ensuring that the pressure on prey species never let up. They could drive entire herds of animals toward waiting ambushes, or simply wear them down through constant harassment, until exhaustion made them easy targets. But the truly diabolical aspect of their social hunting was the way they used their young as weapons. A mother Thylacosmolus would teach her offspring to hunt by using live prey as training tools, not killing them outright, but wounding them just enough to make them helpless, then allowing the juveniles to practice their killing techniques on still living victims. The psychological warfare of watching other members of your species being used as educational tools would break the minds of prey animals long before the physical attacks broke their bodies. Living in the shadow of such creatures would mean abandoning everything you thought you knew about predator behavior. These weren't animals following predictable patterns of hunting and resting, and these were intelligent, adaptable, grudge-holding death machines that treated killing as both survival necessity and recreational activity. And speaking of recreational killing, we need to discuss Epicyon, the bear dog that redefined the concept of overkill. Standing 4 feet at the shoulder and weighing as much as a grizzly bear, this creature possessed the body of a canine, scaled up to absolutely ridiculous proportions. But it was the head that would give you nightmares. A skull over 2 feet long, filled with teeth that looked like they belonged in a medieval torture chamber. Epicyon wasn't just large, it was architecturally impossible. The jaw muscles required to operate that massive skull created a bite force that measured in the thousands of pounds per square inch. Those teeth weren't just sharp, they were engineered like industrial cutting tools, designed to slice through hide, muscle, and bone with equal efficiency. The front teeth could grip and hold, while the back teeth scissored through flesh like organic bolt cutters. But what made Epicyon truly terrifying wasn't its incredible bite force or its impossible size. It was the fact that it was still recognizably a dog. It had pack instincts, social intelligence, and the kind of relentless determination that made canines such successful predators. Except now, those instincts were housed in a body that could kill elephants. The pack hunting strategies of Epicyon were sophisticated beyond anything we see in modern predators. These weren't simple wolfpack tactics scaled up for larger prey. These were complex military operations that could take days to plan and execute. Different pack members had specialized roles that went far beyond the typical alpha, beta, omega structure of modern wolves. Epicyon packs had scouts that could range dozens of miles ahead of the main group, gathering intelligence about prey movements, weather patterns, territorial boundaries of other predator species. They had strategists that could analyze this information and develop hunting plans that accounted for multiple variables and contingencies. They had specialists trained in different types of terrain, different prey species, different environmental conditions. When an Epicyon pack decided to hunt, they didn't just pursue their prey. They orchestrated its destruction with the precision of a symphony conductor, leading a performance of death. Some pack members would drive prey toward predetermined killing zones, while others sealed off escape routes. Some would attack from the front to focus the victim's attention, while others circled around for killing bites to the spine or throat. The coordination required for this level of tactical sophistication demanded communication abilities that went far beyond simple howling or body language. Epicyon packs developed complex vocal vocabularies that allowed them to share detailed information about hunting conditions, prey behavior, environmental hazards, and tactical adjustments. They could call in reinforcements from miles away or coordinate simultaneous attacks across vast distances. But perhaps most disturbing of all, Epicyon packs were capable of learning from other predator species. They would observe the hunting techniques of Smilodon, the pack coordination of Borophagus, the persistence hunting of terror birds, and then incorporate those strategies into their own tactical repertoire. They were essentially military units that studied the art of war from every available source, and then perfected those techniques through constant practice and refinement. The psychological impact of being hunted by an Epicyon pack would be devastating beyond description. These weren't mindless killing machines driven by hunger or instinct. These were intelligent, social, highly adaptable predators that treated hunting as both science and art. They would study their prey for weeks before attacking, learning individual behavioral patterns, identifying psychological weaknesses, developing customized killing strategies for each specific target, and they enjoyed it. Fossil evidence suggests that Epicyon packs would sometimes engage in what can only be described as recreational hunting, pursuing and killing prey. They had no intention of eating simply for the pleasure of the hunt itself. They had solved the basic survival equation so thoroughly that they could afford to kill for entertainment, to hone their skills on living targets, to satisfy psychological needs that went far beyond simple nutrition. The intelligence required for this level of predatory sophistication is staggering when you really think about it. These creatures had to understand not just their own capabilities and limitations, but the capabilities and limitations of dozens of different prey species. They had to be able to predict weather patterns, seasonal changes, migration routes, breeding cycles. They had to be masters of psychology, able to manipulate the behavior of other animals through carefully orchestrated campaigns of fear and intimidation. But even Epicyon, apex predator though it was, had to share its world with creatures that operated according to entirely different rules. Creatures that didn't hunt in packs, or rely on social cooperation, or follow any of the standard predatory playbooks. Creatures that were so perfectly adapted to killing that they had transcended the normal categories of predator and prey entirely. Machairodus, the original saber-toothed cat, moved through this prehistoric world like a force of nature. At 500 pounds of perfectly sculpted death, this creature represented the evolutionary pinnacle of solo hunting efficiency. Those famous saber teeth, each one over 6 inches of razor-sharp killing tool, were attached to jaw muscles that could drive them through the skull of a rhinoceros with a single bite. But what separated Machairodus from every other predator we've discussed wasn't its weapons or its size or even its killing efficiency. It was its complete and total independence. This creature needed nothing and no one to be the most effective killer in its environment. It didn't hunt in packs because it didn't need to. It didn't rely on ambush tactics because it was fast enough to run down any prey in open terrain. It didn't use psychological warfare because its physical capabilities were so overwhelming that psychology was irrelevant. Machairodus was the ultimate expression of the principle that perfection needs no assistance. Every aspect of its anatomy was optimized for delivering death with maximum efficiency and minimum effort. The saber teeth were positioned at exactly the right angle to deliver killing bites without the cat having to adjust its head position. The jaw muscles were perfectly balanced to generate maximum bite force while maintaining the precision needed for surgical strikes. The body was a masterpiece of predatory engineering. forequarters powerful enough to wrestle down prey twice its own size. Hindquarters designed for explosive acceleration and sustained pursuit. A spine flexible enough to allow lightning-quick direction changes while maintaining the stability needed for precision attacks. Every muscle, every bone, every sinew was perfectly adapted for the single purpose of turning living creatures into dead ones. But the truly terrifying aspect of Machairodus wasn't its physical perfection. It was its hunting intelligence. This creature had solved every possible predatory equation and reduced killing to a series of simple, elegant solutions. It could analyze prey species at a glance, identifying weak points, predicting escape routes, calculating attack angles with the precision of a military computer. The hunting style of Machairodus was beautiful in the way that a perfect storm is beautiful, terrible, and irresistible, and utterly devastating. It would select its target with the calm deliberation of a surgeon choosing where to make an incision. It would approach with the patient confidence of something that had never failed to kill whatever it decided to hunt. And when it struck, it did so with the kind of precision that made death look effortless. Those saber teeth weren't just weapons, they were surgical instruments. Machairodus could deliver killing bites that severed major arteries without damaging surrounding tissue, that penetrated vital organs without wasting energy on unnecessary destruction, that caused death within seconds while minimizing the struggle that might damage its precious fangs. The creature's understanding of anatomy was so sophisticated that it could customize its killing technique for each species of prey. Different bite angles for different neck structures, different levels of force for different hide thicknesses, different targeting strategies for different defensive behaviors. It was like having an encyclopedia of death written in muscle memory and refined through millions of years of evolutionary pressure. And it was patient in ways that would break your sanity. Machairodus could follow potential prey for days, studying their behavior patterns, waiting for the perfect moment when all variables aligned for a guaranteed kill. It understood that energy conservation was crucial, that failed hunts could mean starvation, that every attack had to succeed on the first attempt. The psychological pressure of being stalked by such a perfect predator would be unlike anything experienced by prey animals before or since. This wasn't some brutal, chaotic attack that might be survived through luck or desperation. This was methodical, inevitable elimination by a creature that had turned killing into an exact science. But even perfect predators had to deal with the reality that they weren't the only perfect predators in this prehistoric world. The ecosystem of 5.8 million years ago was so rich, so abundant in resources, that it could support multiple apex predator species simultaneously, which meant that even creatures like Machairodus had to be constantly aware of potential competitors, potential threats, potential conflicts over territory and resources. The territorial disputes between apex predators in this world weren't just fights, they were wars. When two perfect killing machines decided they couldn't share the same space, the resulting conflicts could devastate entire ecosystems. The battle between a Machairodus and a Smilodon wasn't just a fight between two cats. It was a clash between two different philosophies of predation, two different approaches to the art of death. Machairodus represented the solo artist approach, the perfectionist who needed no one and nothing to achieve maximum lethality. Smilodon represented the family business approach, the pack hunter who understood that cooperation could multiply individual killing power exponentially. When these two worldviews collided, the results were spectacular and terrifying. The intelligence required to survive such conflicts was staggering. Each predator had to understand not just its own capabilities, but the capabilities of every other apex predator in its environment. They had to be able to read the signs of territorial marking, to interpret scent trails, to recognize the behavioral patterns that indicated when another predator was preparing for confrontation. And they had to be diplomats as well as killers. Most of the time, the The smart play was to avoid direct confrontation with other apex predators. The energy cost was too high, the injury risk too great, the potential benefits too uncertain. So these perfect killing machines learned to negotiate, to establish boundaries, to share resources in ways that minimize conflict while maximizing hunting efficiency. But when negotiation failed, when territories overlapped too much or resources became too scarce, these diplomatic predators became something else entirely. They became berserkers, willing to risk everything in winner-take-all conflicts that could end in mutual destruction. The fossil record is littered with evidence of these prehistoric wars. Skeletons locked in death grips, predators who killed each other in battles so fierce that neither survived to claim victory. Living in a world where even the apex predators were at war with each other meant that nowhere was truly safe, that alliances could shift without warning, that today's neutral territory could become tomorrow's battlefield. The stress of navigating such a complex and deadly political landscape would be enough to drive any thinking creature to madness. And yet, somehow, your ancestors not only survived this world of perfect predators and endless warfare, they thrived in it. They developed the intelligence, the adaptability, the social cooperation that would eventually allow them to outlast every single one of these magnificent killers. But that's a story for another time. Right now, you're still here, 5.8 million years ago, surrounded by neighbors who measure their success in body counts rather than property values. And the sun is starting to set, which means the night shift is about to begin. The creatures we've discussed so far were mostly diurnal hunters, predators that preferred to do their killing in daylight, where they could see their prey clearly. The night belongs to something else entirely, something that doesn't need light to hunt, that uses darkness as a weapon, that turns the simple act of closing your eyes into a potentially fatal mistake. Something that understands that the transition from day to night is when prey animals are most vulnerable, most confused, most likely to make the kind of errors that turn living creatures into meals. As the last light fades from the prehistoric sky, and the sounds of the day hunters give way to the whispers of the night stalkers, you're about to discover that everything we've discussed so far was just the opening act. The real nightmare is about to begin. The darkness that settles over this prehistoric world isn't the comfortable darkness of modern nights, broken by streetlights and the gentle glow of electronics. This is absolute, primordial darkness, the kind that existed before fire, before civilization, before anything stood between you and the things that hunt by sound, by scent, by the heat signature of your terrified body. As your eyes struggle to adjust to the blackness, your other senses are assaulted by sounds that would make horror movie soundtracks seem like lullabies. The deep, resonant calls of creatures so massive that their vocalizations travel for miles, announcing their presence to anything foolish enough to be wandering in their territory after dark. The rustle of vegetation that tells you something the size of a building is moving through the forest with surprising stealth. The splash of water that means death has just launched itself from the river to investigate the scent of warm blood. But it's the silence between these sounds that's truly terrifying. Those moments when every creature in the forest suddenly goes quiet, when even the insects stop their endless chirping, when the entire ecosystem holds its breath because something so dangerous has entered the area that everything else simply shuts down and hopes not to be noticed. In that silence, you hear it. The soft padding of feet that don't belong to any creature you've encountered during the day. Something moving with purpose, with intelligence, with the kind of predatory focus that turns hunting into a religious experience. The footsteps are too regular to be random, too quiet to be accidental, too purposeful to be anything other than death walking. Dinophelis, the false saber-tooth, emerges from the prehistoric night like a shadow given substance. At 200 pounds of lean muscle and predatory intelligence, this creature represents evolution's answer to the question of what happens when you combine the stealth of a leopard with the killing power of a saber-toothed cat and the intelligence of something that understands that darkness is the ultimate weapon. Unlike the massive, overwhelming predators of the daylight hours, Dinophilis is perfectly sized for efficiency. Not so large that it can't move silently through dense vegetation, not so small that it can't take down prey many times its own size. This is precision engineering, every aspect of its anatomy optimized for the specific challenges of nocturnal hunting. Its eyes, adapted for gathering every photon of available light, can see clearly in conditions that would leave you completely blind. But more than that, they can detect movement with supernatural accuracy, picking up the slightest twitch of muscle, the smallest shift in position, the subtle changes in posture that indicate when prey is about to bolt. The ears of Dinophilis are acoustic marvels, capable of isolating individual sounds from the complex symphony of night noises. It can hear your heartbeat from 50 yards away, can distinguish between the breathing patterns of sleeping and waking prey, can identify the specific sound of fear-induced muscle tension. Every breath you take, every beat of your terrified heart, every involuntary shiver of cold or terror is broadcasting your location to a predator, specifically designed to exploit such information. But it's the hunting strategy of Dinophilis that elevates it from mere predator to nightmare fuel. This creature doesn't just hunt in darkness, it uses darkness as a psychological weapon. It will announce its presence deliberately, letting prey know they're being stalked, using the anticipation of attack to weaken their resolve and cloud their judgment. The cat will follow potential victims for hours, sometimes entire nights, staying just at the edge of perception. You'll catch glimpses of movement in your peripheral vision, hear the soft scrape of claws on bark, smell the musky scent of a predator that's been tracking you for miles. But when you turn to look directly, there's nothing there. Just shadows and silence and the growing certainty that something is playing with you. This psychological warfare serves multiple purposes. Exhausted prey moves more slowly, thinks less clearly, makes the kind of fatal mistakes that turn hunter into hunted. Sleep-deprived animals lose their coordination, their reflexes, their ability to distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. By the time Dinophilis decides to attack, its victim is already defeated, broken down by hours of relentless psychological pressure. But the creature's intelligence goes far beyond simple stalking tactics. Dinophilis is a problem solver, capable of analyzing complex situations and developing customized solutions for different types of prey. It understands that different species have different weaknesses, different escape strategies, different ways of responding to pressure. For herd animals, it will isolate individuals through careful manipulation of group dynamics, using controlled appearances and disappearances to create panic that separates weak or young animals from the protection of the group. For solitary prey, it will use the environment itself as a weapon, driving victims toward cliffs, rivers, or other natural hazards that limit escape options. The killing technique of Dinophilis is as sophisticated as its hunting strategy. Those shortened saber teeth aren't the massive fangs of Machairodus or Smilodon, but they're perfectly designed for the kind of precision work required for nocturnal assassination, sharp enough to penetrate hide and muscle with surgical accuracy, positioned at exactly the right angle for delivering killing bites to the neck and throat, strong enough to maintain their grip even when prey struggles desperately. But Dinophilis doesn't rely solely on its teeth. This creature is a master of anatomy, understanding pressure points and nerve clusters with the precision of a medical professional. It can deliver paralyzing bites that immobilize prey without killing them immediately, allowing the cat to feed at leisure without having to worry about the meal escaping or fighting back. The social structure of these nocturnal hunters adds another layer of complexity to an already impossible survival situation. Unlike most cats, Dinophilis shows evidence of cooperative behavior, not pack hunting in the traditional sense, but coordinated territorial control that allows multiple individuals to share information about prey movements and hunting opportunities. They communicate through scent markings that contain detailed information about recent hunts, territorial boundaries, seasonal changes in prey behavior. A Dinophilis entering new territory can read these chemical messages like a detailed intelligence report, learning everything it needs to know about local conditions, prey species, and potential competitors. But perhaps most disturbing of all, these creatures show evidence of teaching behavior. Adult Dinophilis will bring live, wounded prey back to their young, not as food, but as training tools. The juveniles learn to hunt by practicing on helpless victims, developing their skills through hands-on experience with creatures that can't fight back effectively. The psychological impact of witnessing such behavior would be devastating. Watching members of your own species being used as educational materials, seeing the cold calculation with which these predators plan and execute their lessons in death, understanding that you're not just facing individual hunters, but an entire educational system designed to produce more efficient killers. Living through a single night in this world would require a level of mental fortitude that most modern humans simply don't possess. The constant vigilance, the never-ending analysis of every sound and shadow, the exhausting effort of remaining alert when your body desperately needs rest. Sleep becomes not just impossible, but literally suicidal, because closing your eyes for even a few seconds could mean missing the subtle signs that death is approaching.
Yeah.
But Dinophiles isn't the only nightmare stalking through the prehistoric darkness. Moving through the trees above you with the silent grace of falling leaves is Xenosmilus, the cookie-cutter cat, a predator so perfectly adapted to killing that it seems like something designed by a committee of serial killers. At 400 pounds of muscular efficiency, Xenosmilus represents the evolutionary refinement of every successful hunting technique developed by millions of years of predatory experimentation. Its body is built like a living weapon system, every component optimized for maximum lethality with minimum energy expenditure. The saber teeth of Xenosmilus are shorter and broader than those of other saber-toothed cats, designed not for the deep, penetrating wounds favored by its relatives, but for the kind of slashing attacks that cause massive blood loss and rapid death. These teeth can slice through hide, muscle, and major blood vessels in a single bite, creating wounds that are impossible to heal and guaranteed to be fatal. But what makes Xenosmilus truly terrifying isn't its weapons, it's its hunting intelligence. This creature has developed what can only be described as industrial-scale killing techniques. It doesn't hunt individual prey animals, it hunts entire herds, using sophisticated strategies to create mass casualties that provide food for weeks or months. The cat will position itself at natural bottlenecks, locations where terrain forces prey animals to move through narrow passages. Then it will trigger stampedes, using carefully timed attacks to create panic that drives hundreds of animals into killing zones, where escape becomes impossible. The resulting carnage provides enough food to support not just the individual hunter, but potentially an entire family group. This kind of strategic thinking requires an understanding of herd psychology, terrain analysis, and long-term planning that approaches human-level intelligence. Xenosmilus can predict seasonal migration patterns, identify the most vulnerable members of herds, and time its attacks to coincide with weather conditions that maximize prey confusion and minimize escape opportunities. But perhaps most disturbing of all, this creature shows evidence of surplus killing behavior. It will continue attacking long after it has secured enough food for survival, apparently driven by hunting instincts so powerful that they override practical considerations. Fossil sites associated with Xenosmilus show evidence of mass death events, where dozens of animals were killed but not consumed, suggesting that this predator sometimes hunted simply for the pleasure of killing. The ecological impact of such behavior would be staggering. A single Xenosmilus could destabilize entire ecosystems through its surplus killing, creating cascading effects that rippled through food chains and altered the evolutionary pressure on every other species in its territory. Prey animals would be forced to develop increasingly sophisticated anti-predator strategies, while competing predators would have to adapt to environments where their primary food sources were being systematically eliminated by an entity that killed far more than it could ever eat. Living in the shadow of such creatures would mean existing in a world where the normal rules of predator-prey relationships had broken down completely. This wasn't the balanced ecosystem depicted in nature documentaries, where predators take only what they need and maintain stable populations of prey species. This was ecological warfare, where individual predators possessed the power to reshape entire environments according to their hunting preferences, and we're still only scratching the surface of the nocturnal nightmare that was prehistoric Earth. Moving through the darkness with the patient determination of a geological force is Amphision, the bear dog that had grown large enough to hunt elephants for sport. Standing 6 feet at the shoulder and weighing nearly a ton, this creature represents what happens when evolution decides that normal predator-prey relationships are insufficiently dramatic. Amphision doesn't just hunt other animals, it hunts other apex predators. Those massive jaws, capable of crushing the skull of a rhinoceros, are specifically adapted for taking on prey that can fight back with devastating effectiveness. The hunting strategy of Amphision is brutally simple and terrifyingly effective. It identifies the most dangerous predators in its territory and systematically eliminates them, not for food, but for territorial dominance. A single Amphision can clear an area of dozens of square miles of all competing predators, creating a hunting preserve where it alone decides which species live and which species die. This creature doesn't hunt like other predators we've discussed. It doesn't stalk or ambush or use stealth. It simply walks directly toward its chosen target and destroys it through overwhelming physical superiority. Those massive claws can disembowel creatures the size of horses with a single swipe. That enormous bite force can crush spines like twigs, can shatter the reinforced skulls of other predators, can deliver wounds so devastating that death is instantaneous. But what makes Amphision truly nightmarish is its complete lack of fear. This creature has no natural enemies as an adult, no evolutionary pressure to avoid conflict, no survival instinct that urges caution when facing potential threats. It approaches every situation with the absolute confidence of something that has never lost a fight and never expects to. The psychological impact of such supreme confidence is devastating to other predators. Creatures that have spent their entire evolutionary history as apex predators, that have never encountered anything capable of treating them as prey, suddenly find themselves facing something that views them as just another potential meal. The role reversal is so complete, so psychologically overwhelming, that many predators simply freeze when confronted by Amphision, their minds unable to process the reality that they have become the hunted. And Amphision is intelligent enough to exploit this psychological paralysis. It understands that fear is contagious, that the sight of other apex predators being destroyed creates panic that spreads throughout entire ecosystems. It will sometimes engage in what can only be described as terrorism, killing high-profile predators in public, spectacular ways that send a message to every other dangerous creature in its territory. The creature's hunting technique when dealing with other apex predators is as sophisticated as it is brutal. It studies the fighting styles of different predator species, learning their attack patterns, their defensive strategies, their weaknesses and limitations. Then it develops specific countermeasures, customized killing techniques designed to neutralize the particular advantages of each type of opponent. Against saber-toothed cats, it uses its superior size and reach to prevent them from getting close enough to use their specialized fangs. Against pack hunters, it attacks with such overwhelming violence that the pack breaks and scatters before they can coordinate their response. Against ambush predators, it simply walks through their territories with such obvious confidence that they don't dare to attack something so clearly capable of destroying them. But perhaps most terrifying of all, Amphibian shows evidence of teaching behavior similar to that of Dinophilus, but scaled up to match its enormous size and power. Adult Amphibian will bring live apex predators back to their young, allowing juveniles to practice their killing techniques on creatures that would be deadly threats to any other species. Imagine the psychological impact of witnessing a young amphibian, not yet fully grown but already larger than most adult predators, learning to hunt by practicing on a captured Smilodon or Machaerodus. The casual way these creatures treat other apex predators as training tools would send a message that rippled through the entire ecosystem. Nothing is safe. Nothing is too dangerous to be prey. Nothing exists outside the reach of these ultimate predators. The territorial range of a single amphibian could span hundreds of square miles, encompassing dozens of different ecosystems and hundreds of different species. Within that range, it would function as a kind of ecological dictator, determining through its hunting choices which species would thrive and which would face extinction. The creature's preferences would reshape entire food webs, creating evolutionary pressures that affected everything from the largest herbivores to the smallest insects. And they were social. Not pack hunters in the traditional sense, but family groups that maintained contact across vast territories and shared information about hunting opportunities, territorial boundaries, and potential threats. A network of amphibian families could coordinate their activities across thousands of square miles, creating a continent-spanning intelligence network that monitored and controlled apex predator populations throughout their range. The sophistication of this social organization is staggering when you consider what it means. These creatures weren't just individual hunters. They were components of a distributed intelligence system that could track and analyze ecological data across vast scales of space and time. They could predict migration patterns, seasonal changes, population cycles, and evolutionary trends with an accuracy that would impress modern environmental scientists. But all of this nocturnal terror, all of these perfectly designed killing machines, all of these apex predators hunting apex predators, represents just the warm-up act for the true nightmare of prehistoric nights. Because moving through the darkness with the inexorable patience of entropy itself is something that doesn't just hunt other creatures, it hunts other hunters. It preys specifically on predators, turning the entire concept of apex species into a cruel joke. Hyaenodon horridus, the creodont that had evolved beyond the normal categories of carnivore and herbivore into something that can only be described as a professional killer. At 8 feet long and 500 pounds of lean muscle and predatory intelligence, this creature represents the evolutionary endpoint of millions of years of natural selection focused on a single goal, the perfect elimination of other perfect eliminators. The name horridus isn't hyperbole. It's a technical description. This creature is horrible in the most literal sense of the word, designed by evolutionary pressures to inspire horror in anything capable of experiencing fear. Every aspect of its anatomy is optimized for hunting and killing other predators, from the elongated skull filled with teeth like railroad spikes, to the powerful limbs capable of running down prey across dozens of miles of terrain. But what makes Hyaenodon truly nightmarish isn't its physical capabilities, impressive though they are. It's the creature's psychological understanding of predatory behavior. This isn't some mindless killing machine driven by hunger or territorial instinct. This is a thinking, planning, strategizing intelligence that has spent millions of years studying the hunting techniques of other predators and developing countermeasures for every possible survival strategy. Hyaenodon understands that predators think differently than prey animals. They're more aggressive, more confident, more likely to stand and fight when cornered. So it has developed hunting techniques specifically designed to exploit these psychological traits, turning the very characteristics that make other creatures effective predators into vulnerabilities that can be exploited. The creature will stalk other predators for days or weeks, not just learning their hunting patterns, but studying their personalities, their individual quirks, and behavioral preferences. It identifies which predators are overconfident, which ones are cautious, which ones are likely to retreat when faced with superior force, and which ones will fight to the death regardless of the odds. Then it customizes its attack strategy for each individual target, exploiting psychological weaknesses with the precision of a master manipulator. Overconfident predators are lured into situations where their confidence becomes a liability. Cautious predators are subjected to psychological pressure that forces them to make desperate moves. Fighters are exhausted through prolonged harassment before being attacked when they're too tired to resist effectively. The hunting technique itself is as sophisticated as the psychological preparation that precedes it. Hyaenodon doesn't just kill other predators, it does so in ways that send messages to every other dangerous creature in the area. The kills are public, spectacular, designed to demonstrate that no predator, regardless of size, speed, or reputation, is safe from this ultimate hunter. But perhaps most disturbing of all, Hyaenodon shows evidence of what can only be described as recreational hunting of other predators. It will track and kill apex predators, even when it has no knee instincts, so powerful that they have for food, apparently driven by hunting, transcended mere survival necessity, and become something approaching artistic expression. The creature treats predator hunting as a craft to be perfected, constantly refining its techniques, developing new strategies, experimenting with different approaches to the problem of eliminating other eliminators. Each kill becomes a learning experience, an opportunity to gather data about predator behavior that can be applied to future hunts, and it remembers everything. Hyaenodon possesses the kind of memory that allows it to maintain detailed mental files on every predator in its territory, tracking their movements, their hunting success rates, their social relationships, their individual strengths and weaknesses. This information is constantly updated and cross-referenced, creating a comprehensive database of predatory intelligence that would be impressive even by modern standards. The territorial behavior of these ultimate predators creates a kind of ecological pyramid scheme where each hyaenodon claims and defends an area large enough to support dozens of different apex predator species, then systematically hunts those predators to maintain its position at the absolute top of the food chain. The creature doesn't just occupy an ecological niche, it creates and maintains that niche through constant, methodical elimination of potential competitors. Living in a world where your apex predators have apex predators would mean existing in a state of ecological vertigo where nothing is certain, where today's dominant species could become tomorrow's endangered prey, where the very concept of being at the top of the food chain becomes meaningless because there's always something higher, something more dangerous, something more perfectly adapted to the art of killing killers. But even Hyaenodon, ultimate though it may be, operates within constraints imposed by the simple biological reality that individual organisms, no matter how perfectly designed, have limitations. They can only be in one place at a time, can only hunt one target at a time, can only process so much information at once, which brings us to the true nightmare of prehistoric knights, the creature that solved the problem of individual limitations by transcending the concept of individual existence entirely. Moving through the darkness like a distributed intelligence network made flesh is something that doesn't hunt as an individual organism, but as a collective entity that has turned predation into a form of biological mathematics. The pack hunters of Hesperocion, the dawn dog that had evolved beyond simple pack coordination into something approaching a hive mind, focused on the single purpose of turning living creatures into dead ones. These aren't individual predators that happen to hunt together. These are components of a larger organism, specialized cells in a body designed for killing that can span hundreds of square miles and include thousands of individual animals. Each member of a Hesperocyon pack has a specific role that goes far beyond the typical alpha, beta, omega structure of modern pack hunters. There are scouts specialized in different types of terrain, strategists that analyze complex hunting scenarios, communication specialists that maintain contact between widely separated pack members, logistics coordinators that manage the distribution of food and resources across vast territories. But what makes this collective intelligence truly nightmarish is its learning ability. The pack doesn't just remember successful hunting strategies, it continuously refines and improves them through constant experimentation and data analysis. Each hunt becomes a research project, an opportunity to test new hypotheses about predator behavior and develop more efficient killing techniques. The pack can conduct multiple simultaneous experiments across its territory, testing different approaches to the same hunting problem, and then sharing the results through their sophisticated communication network. The successful techniques are rapidly disseminated throughout the entire collective, while failed strategies are discarded and forgotten. This distributed learning system allows the pack to adapt to new situations with supernatural speed. When they encounter a new prey species, they can develop effective hunting strategies within days or even hours, drawing on their collective database of predatory knowledge to identify weaknesses and exploit them with ruthless efficiency. But the truly terrifying aspect of this collective intelligence is its scalability. A Hesperocyon pack can grow to include thousands of individual animals without losing coordination or effectiveness. The larger the pack becomes, the more sophisticated its hunting strategies become, the more territory it can control, the more prey species it can eliminate simultaneously, and they are perfectly willing to hunt other pack predators. A mature Hesperocyon collective can take on and destroy entire packs of other species, using their superior coordination and numbers to overwhelm even the most sophisticated group hunting strategies. They don't just compete with other pack hunters, they systematically eliminate them, absorbing their territories and resources into an ever-expanding empire of coordinated death. The psychological warfare capabilities of such a collective are beyond anything we've discussed so far. They can orchestrate campaigns of terror that span months or years, gradually wearing down entire ecosystems through carefully coordinated harassment, isolation, and elimination of key species. They understand that ecological systems are interconnected, that removing certain species creates cascading effects that can collapse entire food webs. And they use this understanding as a weapon. A Hesperocyon collective can deliberately target keystone species, creatures whose elimination will cause maximum disruption to local ecosystems. They can create ecological disasters that force other predators to compete for increasingly scarce resources, weakening them to the point where they become easy targets for elimination. The territorial control exercised by these collective entities represents a form of biological imperialism that dwarfs anything we've seen from individual predators. A single mature pack can claim and defend territory spanning thousands of square miles, encompassing dozens of different ecosystems and hundreds of different species. Within that territory, they function as the ultimate authority, determining which species live and which species die according to their own incomprehensible agenda. But perhaps most disturbing of all, the Hesperocyon collective shows evidence of long-term planning that spans multiple generations. They don't just hunt for immediate survival needs, they hunt to shape the evolutionary future of their territory. By selectively eliminating certain genetic lines while preserving others, they can influence the evolutionary development of prey species, essentially farming them for desired characteristics. This represents a level of biological control that approaches the manipulative capabilities of modern genetic engineering, achieved through nothing more than selective predation applied with surgical precision over extended periods of time. The collective is literally redesigning the ecosystems within their territory, creating customized environments that serve their hunting preferences and maximize their long-term survival prospects. Living in a world controlled by such collective intelligences would mean existing not just as prey, but as raw material in a biological engineering project whose goals and methods are completely incomprehensible to individual organisms. You wouldn't just be hunted, you would be managed, cultivated, selectively bred through predation pressure to serve purposes you could never understand. And through it all, the night continues to deepen around you, bringing with it sounds and smells and presences that your modern mind simply cannot process. Because we haven't even begun to discuss the truly alien creatures that stalked through this prehistoric darkness, the ones that had evolved so far beyond normal predatory paradigms that they represent something entirely outside our understanding of how life on Earth is supposed to function. The darkness is absolute now, broken only by the occasional flash of bioluminescence from creatures that use light itself as a weapon, as a lure, as a means of communication in a world where showing yourself to potential prey is the ultimate expression of predatory confidence. And in that darkness, something is moving, something that doesn't follow any of the rules we've established, something that represents the final, ultimate expression of what happens when evolution has unlimited time and resources to perfect the art of turning living creatures into dead ones. The night shift is just getting started, and the worst is yet to come. The sound that cuts through the prehistoric night isn't a roar or a growl, or even the thunderous footsteps of some massive predator. It's something far more unsettling, a rhythmic clicking, like enormous castanets being played by invisible hands in the darkness. Each click is perfectly timed, perfectly spaced, creating a pattern that seems almost musical until you realize what you're actually hearing. It's the sound of jaws snapping shut, massive jaws, testing their bite force against empty air, warming up for the kill like a pianist practicing scales before a concert. And those jaws belong to something that has redefined the very concept of aquatic predation. Deinosuchus, the terrible crocodile, emerges from the prehistoric waters like a living battleship designed by nightmares. At 35 feet long and weighing as much as a loaded freight car, this creature makes modern crocodiles look like bath toys. But size is just the beginning of what makes Deinosuchus the ultimate expression of patient, calculating death. Those jaws, when fully opened, could swallow a modern automobile whole. The bite force measures in the tens of thousands of pounds per square inch, enough to crush the bones of whales like breadcrumbs. But what makes this creature truly terrifying isn't the raw power of its bite. It's the intelligence behind it. Deinosuchus has learned something that no other predator in this prehistoric world has mastered. It has learned to use time itself as a weapon. This creature can remain motionless for hours, days, even weeks, lying just beneath the surface of the water like a log that happens to have eyes and teeth. Its metabolism is so efficient that it can survive on a single large meal for months, which means it can afford to be patient in ways that would kill warm-blooded predators. But this patience isn't passive, it's strategic. Deinosuchus studies its environment with the dedication of a scholar, learning the patterns of every species that comes to drink, the seasonal changes in water levels, the migration routes of prey animals, the hunting schedules of competing predators. It builds a mental database of information that spans years, decades, possibly even its entire lifetime. When it finally decides to hunt, it does so with the accumulated wisdom of decades of observation. The creature doesn't just know where its prey will be. It knows when they'll be there, what they'll be doing, how they'll react to different types of threats, what their escape routes are, and how to cut off every possible avenue of survival. The attack itself is a masterpiece of physics and timing. Deinosuchus can launch its massive bulk out of the water with explosive force, reaching speeds that defy everything you think you know about crocodilian locomotion. The creature becomes a guided missile, several tons of muscle and bone, and crushing jaws traveling at velocities that make escape impossible and survival irrelevant. But here's what makes it truly nightmarish. Deinosuchus doesn't always kill its prey immediately. Sometimes it prefers to drag victims underwater, not to drown them, but to store them. The creature maintains underwater pantries, caves and crevices where it wedges still living prey animals, keeping them fresh and available for future consumption. Imagine being dragged beneath the surface by jaws that could cut you in half, only to find yourself trapped in an underwater prison with other victims, all of you waiting your turn to become dinner for a creature that measures its meal planning in months rather than minutes. The psychological horror of such a situation would break minds long before the physical reality broke bodies. The territorial behavior of Deinosuchus creates aquatic dead zones that span hundreds of miles of river and lake systems. A single individual can claim and defend waterways that serve as the primary water source for thousands of different species. Within that territory, the creature functions as an aquatic dictator, determining through its hunting choices which species have access to water and which species die of thirst in the prehistoric heat. But even more disturbing is the creature's intelligence when it comes to manipulating other predators. Deinosuchus has learned to use the carcasses of its kills as bait, positioning dead prey animals in locations where they'll attract other predators, then attacking those predators when they come to feed. It's essentially running a prehistoric protection racket, using food as bait to eliminate competitors and expand its territorial control. The creature shows evidence of tool use that goes beyond anything seen in modern crocodilians. It will manipulate branches, rocks, and even the bones of previous victims to create traps and ambush points. These aren't simple structures, but sophisticated engineering projects that demonstrate an understanding of physics, water flow, and animal behavior that approaches human-level problem-solving ability, and it remembers individual animals. Deinosuchus can recognize specific prey animals that have escaped previous attacks, tracking them across seasons and years, learning their new behavioral patterns, adapting its hunting strategies to account for their increased wariness. The creature treats every failed attack as a learning experience, constantly refining its techniques based on the responses of potential victims. But perhaps most terrifying of all, Deinosuchus shows evidence of communication with others of its kind across vast distances. They coordinate their territorial boundaries, share information about seasonal prey movements, and even engage in cooperative hunting when dealing with particularly large or dangerous prey species. The thought of multiple Deinosuchus working together represents a level of aquatic, predatory coordination that would make every water source in the prehistoric world a potential death trap. Rivers, lakes, even shallow streams could be patrolled by creatures capable of planning coordinated attacks with mathematical precision. Living in such a world would mean that water, the most basic necessity of life, becomes the most dangerous resource to obtain. Every drink would require careful reconnaissance. Every river crossing would be a life or death gamble. Every rainstorm would create new hazards as these aquatic nightmares expanded their territories into previously safe areas. But as terrifying as the aquatic predators are, they're confined to water. You might think that staying away from rivers and lakes would provide some measure of safety. You would be wrong, because moving through the prehistoric night with the silent efficiency of living darkness is something that has solved the problem of terrestrial hunting so completely that it makes every other predator we've discussed look like an amateur. Barbarophilis, the nimravid that had evolved beyond the normal constraints of feline anatomy into something that can only be described as a precision death delivery system. At 600 pounds of perfectly coordinated muscle and bone, this creature represents what happens when evolution spends millions of years refining a single concept: how to kill things as efficiently as possible. Those saber teeth, each one 8 inches of razor-sharp killing tool, aren't just weapons. They're surgical instruments, precisely calibrated for delivering death with mathematical accuracy. But unlike other saber-toothed predators, Barbarophilis has solved the fundamental problem that plagued its relatives: how to use those massive fangs without breaking them on bone. or losing them in struggles with desperate prey? The answer lies in the creature's hunting technique, which represents a quantum leap in predatory sophistication. Barbarophilis doesn't wrestle its prey to the ground like Smilodon, or deliver crushing bites like Machairodus. Instead, it has developed what can only be called surgical assassination techniques. The creature approaches its targets with the patience of a surgeon and the precision of a watchmaker. It studies anatomy with academic thoroughness, learning the exact location of major arteries, nerve clusters, and vital organs for every prey species in its territory. Then it delivers killing strikes with such accuracy that death occurs within seconds, often before the victim even realizes it's been attacked. Those saber teeth slide between ribs like scalpels, penetrating hearts with surgical precision. They slip between vertebrae to sever spinal cords, causing instant paralysis. They find the exact angles needed to reach brain stems through natural gaps in skull structure. Every attack is a masterclass in applied anatomy, delivered with the cold efficiency of a medical professional who happens to specialize in ending lives. But what makes Barbarophilis truly nightmarish isn't its killing technique. It's the creature's understanding of pain and suffering. This predator has learned that fear and anticipation can be more effective weapons than teeth and claws. It will stalk prey for days, making its presence known through deliberate signs. Claw marks on trees, scent markings, the remains of previous kills positioned where they'll be discovered. The psychological pressure builds gradually, systematically, like a master torturer who understands that the anticipation of pain is often worse than pain itself. By the time Barbarophilis decides to attack, its victims are already broken, their minds shattered by days or weeks of knowing that death is stalking them with surgical precision. The creature's intelligence extends to understanding the social dynamics of different prey species. It knows which animals are leaders, which ones are followers, which ones are protectors, and which ones are expendable. It will sometimes kill selectively, eliminating the most capable members of herds, while leaving the weak and inexperienced alive, creating chaos and confusion that makes the survivors easier targets for future hunts. This isn't random predation. This is ecological manipulation on a scale that approaches biological warfare. Barbarophilis can destabilize entire social structures through carefully targeted assassinations, creating ripple effects that weaken prey populations for generations. The territorial behavior of these surgical killers creates zones of terror that extend far beyond their actual hunting grounds. The mere knowledge that a Barbarophilis is operating in an area causes behavioral changes in prey species that cascade through entire ecosystems. Animals alter their feeding patterns, their migration routes, their social structures, all in desperate attempts to avoid becoming the next target for surgical elimination. But even more disturbing is the creature's apparent enjoyment of its craft. Fossil evidence suggests that Barbarophilis would sometimes engage in what can only be described as artistic killing, delivering wounds that were more elaborate than necessary, creating patterns of damage that served no practical purpose beyond aesthetic expression. The creature treats death as an art form to be perfected, constantly experimenting with new techniques, new approaches, new ways of turning the elimination of living beings into something approaching sculpture. Each kill becomes a canvas, each wound a brushstroke in some incomprehensible masterpiece of violence, and it teaches these techniques to its offspring, with the dedication of a master craftsman passing on trade secrets to the next generation. Young Barbarophilis learn not just how to kill, but how to kill beautifully, how to turn murder into art, how to find aesthetic pleasure in the precise application of lethal force. The educational process involves live prey animals used as practice subjects, allowing juveniles to experiment with different killing techniques while their instructors provide guidance and critique. The psychological impact of witnessing such methodical instruction in the art of death would be devastating to any thinking creature unfortunate enough to observe it. But as sophisticated as individual predators have become, they're still operating within the limitations of single organisms. They can only be in one place at a time, can only process so much information at once, can only hunt one target at a time. Which brings us to something that has transcended these limitations entirely. Moving through the prehistoric night like a distributed nervous system, made flesh is something that doesn't hunt as individuals, but as components of a larger organism designed for the single purpose of turning entire ecosystems into graveyards. The pack hunters of Epicyon have evolved beyond simple cooperation into something that approaches a biological supercomputer focused entirely on the mathematics of death. These aren't just wolves that happen to be larger than bears. These are specialized components of a collective intelligence network that spans thousands of square miles and includes thousands of individual animals, each one perfectly adapted to serve specific functions in an organization chart written in blood and bone. The pack structure is so sophisticated that it requires its own terminology to describe adequately. There are primary scouts that range hundreds of miles ahead of the main pack, gathering intelligence about prey movements, weather patterns, territorial boundaries of other predator species. There are secondary scouts that verify and cross-reference this information. There are analysts that process the data and develop hunting strategies. There are communications specialists that maintain contact between widely separated pack elements. But perhaps most disturbing are the psychological warfare specialists. Pack members that have been specifically trained to break the minds of prey animals through carefully orchestrated campaigns of terror. These specialists understand that fear is contagious, that panic can spread through entire herds like wildfire, that psychological pressure can be more effective than physical force in weakening prey defenses. They will conduct elaborate campaigns that span weeks or months, gradually escalating the pressure on target populations through a carefully choreographed series of attacks, near misses, and psychological demonstrations. The goal isn't to kill immediately, but to create such high levels of chronic stress that prey animals become physically and mentally compromised, making them easier targets for the final coordinated assault. The hunting strategies employed by mature Epicyon packs represent military-level tactical sophistication. They can coordinate simultaneous attacks across hundreds of square miles, with different pack elements executing precisely timed maneuvers that drive prey toward predetermined killing zones. They can adapt their strategies in real time based on changing conditions, with individual pack members making split-second decisions that serve the larger tactical plan. But what makes this collective intelligence truly nightmarish is its learning ability. The pack doesn't just remember successful hunting strategies, it continuously improves them through constant experimentation and analysis. Each hunt becomes a data-gathering exercise, an opportunity to test new hypotheses about predator-prey dynamics and develop more efficient killing techniques. The pack can conduct multiple simultaneous experiments across its territory, testing different approaches to the same hunting problem, and then sharing the results through their sophisticated communication network. Successful techniques are rapidly disseminated throughout the entire collective, while failed strategies are analyzed, modified, and retested until they become successful. So here you are, 5.8 million years into the past, having survived a single day in a world where your neighbors weren't concerned with property values, but with whether you'd make it to sunrise. This wasn't some Hollywood fantasy of noble savages and majestic beasts. This was nature's brutal mathematics, where every equation ended in death, and survival was a temporary victory against impossible odds. Your ancestors lived through this nightmare. They endured neighbors that could crush buildings, hunt across continents, and plan destruction with intelligence that matched their own. They survived when being human meant being prey, when showing weakness meant elimination, when every breath was borrowed time in a world designed to kill them. The fact that you exist today, watching this video from the safety of modern civilization, is testament to their extraordinary resilience. Somewhere in your DNA lies the genetic memory of what it took to live alongside monsters, and somehow find a way to outlast them all. Sweet dreams.